Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to one of the fastest growing podcasts on the internet, Unscripted Company, hosted by two lovely gentlemen, myself, JK, my lovely co-host, Riley. If you're new to the podcast, first of all, welcome. As with most company endeavors, people love to congregate around the water cooler. So we typically start the first 15 minutes of each episode just kind of talking about our past week, seeing what's going on there out in the world with what we call the water cooler. So Riley, I know you were texting me, man, it might have been yesterday, it might have been this morning. Time is blurring together, time's all relative. But you said you're closing on another property potentially, or even tell me what's going on there.
Well, we've been under contract for about a week now, like literally the day after our last recording, we went under contract for a house. Technically, the option period was supposed to end today, but we got everything hashed out, negotiated, worked out. Option period is done. Realistically, the last hurdle that I can foresee is just the appraisal. The appraisal goes well, which they should be ordering that this week. Then we should be closing July 9th is what the expected closing date is. And then I'm getting ready to submit another offer, hopefully tomorrow, for another client that I've been working with for like 6, almost 7 months. So here's to hoping that works out, because that'd be awesome. But yeah, I mean, work is going good. I mean, it's still hotter than Satan's balls, but hey, it is what it is,
No, that's exciting. July 9th is actually my sister's birthday, so shout out. I know you're not watching, but shout out to you out there.
You should watch. This is your brother's podcast. You should be watching this podcast right now.
Hey, his words, not mine. No, that's exciting though. Dude, yeah, it's starting to heat up. I was seeing like news articles about apparently the Northeast or like the East Coast right now is going through some heat waves. So for those of you listening out there, if you're on the East Coast or in the Northeast, welcome to just what we call normal life in Texas. I mean, yes, it kind of sucks. You're having a hot summer or hot early summer. Still only June. July hasn't even hit yet. It's weird because I guess we consider it summertime already, but I imagine there's probably parts of this country where they don't view it as summertime until maybe around 4th of July or post 4th of July, because that's when they really start to heat up. Whereas it's been hot here for a while now, hot and humid because of all the storms. And I know we got a lot of rain in Central Texas this past week because of that. I didn't even realize until it happened. There was like a tropical storm that went up through South Texas. And so a lot of like Corpus Christi area got hit pretty hard by some heavy rains. And I know Houston, Galveston area got hit by some heavy torrential downpours as well. My parents were sending me photos of basically how high the water levels were on Galveston Island. Like the islands are very prone to flooding regardless of what the ocean's doing. And so there was a photo of like a FedEx truck going by, and the water was like well above the wheel well on like a FedEx truck. So there's definitely it's been hot and muggy, to say the least.
It's been dry here for like 3 weeks. Like how we got all that rain and all those bad storms, and it's just been nothing.
Oh man, so y'all haven't gotten any more rain since then, really? You just got all of it, like ripped the Band-Aid off and...
Pretty much, and it's like we're about to have probably a very dry summer, so I've been encouraging all of my future clients, potential clients, old clients, like, hey, water your foundation, like water your ground around your foundation, because you want to make sure that stays where it's at. But who knows? I mean, I haven't really checked the weather as far as like seeing what the forecast is for the weeks ahead. I kind of just, all I know is I wake up and it's sunny and bright outside, and I'm like, no, I need my like cloudiness and not all the blistering hot sun, but here we are.
I feel like in an alternate life, I would thrive in the Pacific Northwest. I love the idea of just not forever being overcast, but I like that overcast, calm, cool days, maybe some rain half through the week, something like that. But I don't know why my ancestors came to Texas. Like, I have my ideas, but like I see how I say that? But like, it's hot. Like, I'm just like, I don't get it. If central air wasn't a thing, I would not be here. I don't think.
It's funny though, because in Texas, the past few years have just been weird, but it's like one thing's always consistent is that the 3 months that we have for summertime, Texas doesn't mess around. Like for those of you who, wherever you may be watching from, if you do not reside in Texas, like there are different forms of heat. And the fact that Texas can experience all those different forms all in the same day in different regions, it says a lot versus like when you have areas like Nevada and New Mexico where it's just a dry heat all the time. Texas can get a dry heat, a humid heat, and then just a straight up like blistering sweat heat in the south, like southern areas of Texas. So it's like we get all of them, but it's ridiculous, man. Like this, like I for the first time, like I mean I didn't do it last year, I should have, but like spray, like if for those of you who are homeowners, like spray your AC, like your external AC unit, you can use a water hose and like spray it out and clean it out because once stuff gets trapped in there, like it can cause it to overwork itself, and then that's what you. So even if you rent a house, like you can still do that. I did it for our apartment AC. So
I don't think I've ever thought to even look into that before. Just that makes so much sense. That gunk is just gonna, get caught in there. Just it's a giant fan. So sucking stuff in to.
Yeah.
Huh. I need to look into that because man, we had AC problems at the early part of last summer. Thankfully, it's all been fixed. Fingers crossed. But I ain't got time to deal with that again because it gets hot, especially in a 2-story house. The second floor, just because it traps all that heat. Lord have mercy. It is not something I want to be dealing with.
Yeah, on the second floor.
Yeah.
The apartment complex.
Man, so I know I texted you this, but just for an update for those listening and those committed followers and subscribers. So last week, I was sick on the podcast. And let me tell you, so timeline of basically what happened here. Saturday night, I was like, okay, like I feel like I was having allergies. Something was rolling in, but also mold pollen was really high in Central Texas. So I was like, you know what? It's probably just allergies. No big deal. I'm allergic to everything in the state and it's always trying to kill me. So I went to bed that night, woke up Sunday, and I was like, whoa, felt like I got hit by a train. And I was like, okay, maybe it's a sinus infection. Maybe it's like a light flu or something because I had traveled that past week. I traveled for work to go to New York, and I was like, I probably picked up some bug or something. I was close because I didn't get any better after our podcast on Sunday. Woke up Monday. I had like 101, 102 fever, and I was like, this sucks. Tuesday morning, woke up 103 fever, and I was like, okay, I'm going to the urgent care clinic because I'm like 103 fever is no joke. Something is going on, and if I just need antibiotics, like pump me with whatever you need to pump me with, and let's figure this out. So I go to the doctor, and they run all the tests. It's like they run the strep swab and the flu swab and all that stuff. Come to find out, the doctor comes back and they go, hey, so we got good news and we got bad news. I was like, all right, whatever, lay it on me. They go, well, good news is we know it's not strep and we know it's not the flu. But the bad news is you got the COVID. And the other part of what? Say that again?
COVID-20, y'all. Like, yeah.
Basically, like it was some wild nonsense. But they're like, the other part of the bad news is not only do you have COVID, your demographics are too young and healthy to where we can't prescribe you anything. So you're just going to have to ride this out. So I'm not part of like an at-risk demographic, so they can't prescribe me Paxlovid or really any kind of pharmaceutical. So really what they did was, and I used to have it sitting here on the desk, it's on my other desk over there, but they gave me a printout of like all the vitamins and nutrients they recommend taking, and it's stuff I already know, and it's stuff I take almost on a daily basis. It's like zinc and vitamin D, vitamin C, vitamin E and A, like, magnesium, stuff like that, and to like rotate it out between like Tylenol and ibuprofen. And the legitimate like suggestion for the doctor was like, sorry, kid, you got to ride this one out because you're already too fit and healthy. And I'm like, that's cool. It's not like we've already had 4 years to figure this stuff out. To like I would understand if this was like 2021, maybe even 22, and it's like, hey man, sorry, we got stuff on short supply and we got to save it for the at-risk, communities. But no, this is this is middle of 2024, and apparently we don't have enough to go around, which is okay. I mean, I wrote it out. I'm at the very, very tail end of it now. I just got like a residual cough and some brain fog, so I'm only mildly dumb. But outside of that, it was just a wild experience. I think it was also my first time getting COVID, because I felt like I got hit by a train. So somehow I managed to go 4 years without ever getting this thing, and now I've got it, or had it. Maybe it's still in me. I don't know. I'm infected.
So just for context here, everyone, this man, like last week when we were talking about this, we made a joke that he had some new strain of COVID, like we didn't know what it was, like he's like patient zero. Man goes to the doctor 2 days later, finds out he has COVID. All I'm saying is Unscripted Company is predicting the future firsthand. Like, this is what we do. This is how we do things around here.
No, I'm glad you said that, because a follow-up actually to last week, for those of you, if you haven't watched last week's episode, obviously go back, watch, and listen. But one of the things we talked about was it was the topic we led off the main part of the episode with, was the new automatic inscription service, to where if selective service, basically the idea of the draft for the U.S. military, historically you had to manually sign up for that. You were legally obligated to, but you had to manually sign up. Whereas now they basically use computer software to automate that sign-up process for everybody. It's so convenient. We can just ship your ass off overseas. But the whole idea, I think you brought it up initially, was, well, if this is going to be about equality, is this just for men, or is this also, for the female population? And I had saw an article, I think maybe within 24, 48 hours after we had filmed that episode, that part of it is, yes, it is still pending. So it hasn't been like signed off yet, but it would include the female portion of the population as well. And so you kind of called it on last week's episode, even though that may have already been mainstream info, but you and I had no idea about it. So you were onto something.
Yeah, like I said, man, I was just, and it was one of those things where it's like, when you realistically think about it, because like there's been a lot of stuff talked about lately, like you see other podcasts and you see how a lot of females will talk about, we want equality, we want the same pay, we want the same this, same that, but they don't want to do the same things that a lot of the men that hold those specific jobs or careers do. Not saying women aren't qualified enough to do them. They want the same benefits without doing the same work, essentially. And so when we talked about that, like, I had no idea. I didn't think anything of it. You sent me that article and I about lost my mind. I was like, are you kidding me right now? Like, this is happening? And it hasn't happened yet, like you said, but it's in the works and it's in the talks. Like, they're trying to get it to pass, and we don't know if it will. But if it does happen, though, there's definitely going to be a lot of upset Generation Zs, Gen Zers out there that are going to be real mad, because they're the ones that talked about it. But now when it comes time to be about it, how many of them are going to be like, yeah, we're not doing that?
Yeah.
So
I think time will tell, but
it's going to be interesting.
It will be interesting. Something else is also really interesting, to make a pivot here. If you rewind all the way back to the very first podcast episode we did, it was talking about how, will or if Texas should break away from the union, or just, become its own thing and, kind of go it solo, maybe bring some other states with it, create this new mega region per se. And I don't recall us ever speaking about the topic I'm about to bring up here. But I've always had this thesis over the last maybe like 5 years or so, like a serious thesis about like the future of this country, the United States, and really North America, a continent as a whole. The future is really pointing and focused on Texas. Like, I think in the rest of our lifetime, I think we're going to see more and more data points showing that, gone are the days of people looking to the West Coast or the East Coast, i.e. California, New York, as the thought leaders of the country, whether that be politically, technologically, in the business and economic world, things like that. I think a lot of that's starting to come and being pointing to Texas as a whole. And so one thing that I was thinking about this week that I've been heavily following, I don't know if I brought this up on the podcast yet. Are you aware of the Texas Stock Exchange?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, this is exciting. So in the notes, Riley, if you want to follow along, you can. No worries if not. I'm not going to share my screen just because it's a news article. But earlier this month, the Wall Street Journal had this exclusive, it was a big news piece, I think, when it came out. Now you can find all over the place just because the news is spread now. But there is a concerted effort to launch a new national stock exchange in Dallas that's going to take on the New York Stock Exchange and NASDAQ. And it's actually being backed by two heavy hitters in the private equity and hedge fund world, BlackRock and Citadel Securities. So if anyone follows, big bad, Wall Street, BlackRock and Citadel are like that's like Goliath and Goliath walking into a room right there. It was like numero uno and dos in Wall Street right there. But earlier this month, news broke. So I have an article here from the Texas Tribune just because it's local, non-profit, theoretically non-biased, but just the brief part here says, a group of financial firms and investors is planning to launch a Texas-based private market stock exchange and offer traders an alternative to the New York Stock Exchange and NASDAQ. The group, which includes BlackRock, Citadel Securities, and about 24 investors, raised approximately $120 million of capital to create the Texas Stock Exchange, which would be headquartered in Dallas. They are now seeking registration with the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, otherwise known as the SEC, to operate as a national securities exchange later this year. Quote, Texas and the other states in the Southeast Quadrant have become economic powerhouses. Combined with the demand we are seeing from investors and corporations for expanded alternatives to trade and list equities, this is an opportune time to build a major national stock exchange in Texas, said James Lee, founder and CEO of the Texas Stock Exchange Group. Stock exchanges, of course, are private institutions where stocks, bonds, and other securities are traded. If the SEC clears the Texas Stock Exchange to begin operations, it will be the first stock exchange to launch in the country in recent years. According to the Wall Street Journal, which first reported on the creation of the new exchange, the Texas Stock Exchange, otherwise known as the txse, promises to be more CEO-friendly than other exchanges and wants to capitalize on discontent over new rules and rising compliance costs at NASDAQ and the New York Stock Exchange. So, very interesting to say the least that, the other thing to call out here, you can read through the rest of the article if you want, Riley, or I can read through it too, but if this is approved by the SEC, which it looks like it probably will be, they expect to start trading securities later this year.
So it's funny though, because we didn't touch on any of this, but there's been a lot of stuff happening when it comes to Texas. Do we know if, what we speculated in that first episode is going to happen? No, we don't. But it was funny though, because my dad called me and he's a Mavericks fan. And so we got to talking about Mark Cuban and how he sold 51% of his shares. So theoretically, he's actually not the owner of the Mavs anymore. Right. Like he's got voting rights essentially, but he's a minority in the vote. And the people that he sold it to essentially kind of goes back around what we talked about Texas eventually having gambling and eventually legalizing gambling in Texas, sports betting, all that kind of stuff. But it also begs the question, because I told my dad, I was like, he thinks the same thing that we thought too. Like Texas is going to have like a Vegas variation to it. And I told him about how like there's like that large piece of land that we talked about between, it's like San Antonio, Austin, and then like all west of there, like there's just nothing out there. It's like that could be the Las Vegas of Texas, essentially. Obviously, we still don't know if any of that's going to happen. But to me, though, what would this symbolize, or what would this mean for Texas, essentially? Because we still would it be just on a state level, or would it still be a federal level?
It would be a national stock exchange. It would be very similar to what the New York Stock Exchange is, to where, like, obviously, I'm a big dum-dum. I don't know all the regulations that it requires to be listed on the New York Stock Exchange or NASDAQ, but you would have to be like a U.S. listed company. The one when I've been reading into this, one of the big boosts for Texas would give a lot of oil and gas companies in West Texas an easier route to being publicly listed, which would give more capital to those companies to be able to operate at a higher level than they could today. One of the ideas with the stock market and why they would want to open it in Texas is, I mean, long story short, less regulation, which could be good or bad depending on how you want to look at it, because, you know, it's like the Wild West in the financial world where there's a lot of opportunity because of the lack of regulation, but also, you know, if that train gets moving too fast and then it comes off the rails, then, ooh, that gets nasty. I like to think it's a good thing. I think it's a little sketch that BlackRock and Citadel are the two leading the pack on that, because I do have to pause for a second and be like, okay, why would they want for this to be happening? That's why I paused, because I'm thinking, okay, they're already trading literally trillions of dollars worth of money on the New York Stock Exchange and NASDAQ. So why do they need a new playground to play in with less regulation? That's my only pause for concern. Is like, okay, hold up. What's their prerogative?
I mean, you have to think Texas has one of the largest state infrastructures in the country. Like, there's we have so much, realistically speaking, we have so much untapped land still available, and like just untapped pretty much anything in Texas. I mean, look at how many big companies have come to Texas and corporations have. Like, this is where their headquarters is at. But I don't know. I mean, maybe they know. Again, I mean, they control like 95% of everything, realistically, if not more. I mean, they probably know something that we couldn't even fathom. So, but to pivot off that and talking about trillions of dollars in trading, I saw that what you put, the U.S. government interest payment has now crossed $1 trillion. So, for those of you who are listening and or watching, let that sink in for a minute. Our country has more debt and interest payments alone than what we'll ever be able to pay off ever in our lives.
Yeah. So for those of you in audio land right now, I'm sharing a chart. This is from the txse, the artist formerly known as Twitter, their account Game of Trades. Right here, this is a chart showing government interest expenses crossing $1 trillion this year. And basically, for those who are just in audio land, the data starts in 1947 and goes through Q1 of 2024. Now, you know, the line kind of gradually increases through the 50s, 60s, 70s, a little bit of an increase late 80s and the 90s. But then once you hit about 2019, it's just basically a straight line up to where in like 2019, we're looking at about 500 or so billion with a B. But then by 2024, we're already crossing $1 trillion in just the interest expenses alone. That's kind of crazy. I actually had to kind of go in line with this. I didn't plan to actually bring this up, but on my Twitter account, I tweeted something because I saw I saw a graphic. So our national debt, $34 trillion, right? It's just like, it's by the time this episode posts, it'll probably be at like $100 trillion. Who knows? But the $34 trillion national debt is roughly the value of the following economies put together: China, Germany, Japan, India, and the United Kingdom. That's how much debt we have. And to know that that much debt is causing over $1 trillion now of interest payments every year, and that interest is only going to go up. The more debt we have, the higher that interest is going to go too. Like, and I don't see us slowing that down anytime soon.
I don't think I don't think our country will ever get out of debt. Like, this world will come to an end before our like country officially pays everything off.
Yeah.
So.
Oops. I turned off my camera. I didn't realize that.
I saw that.
I'm back.
Again, it's unscripted. This is what we do around here. But no, I mean, for real though, it does beg the question. I mean, it's like we're gaining more interest every year than what we can afford to pay off. And at this point, I mean, they're expecting us to make those payments, but yet it's the debt that they put us under all these years. You know, like, don't get me wrong. I mean, it's like some years it couldn't have been helped. I mean, you have to think for what, a year and a half, 2 years, nobody was really working or everything was all remote. I honestly think, if most companies went remote and could like alleviate a lot of that unnecessary, you know, driving to work and this, like a lot of costs would probably substantially go down. Unless it was a specific job where you had to be at the physical location, I feel like most jobs you could just do from home, like 100%.
Yeah, no, I think you're onto something with that. I think a lot of white collar America can be done remotely. I think the problem is the jobs themselves can be done remotely, but can the people doing the jobs be trusted to do the jobs remotely? If that makes sense.
I'm pretty sure there was a study that came out. It was either this year or last year, because it was sometime after COVID, like after the major hits of COVID, that it talked about how people that were allowed to work from home were actually more productive because they weren't forced to go into an office where they just didn't want to be and didn't have the motivation. But if you allow people to have that freedom to do the work from home, they actually got more work done and were actually a lot more productive working from home because they had the freedom to do their work, do stuff at home. You know, like they got things done. And I know that there's been this huge push for not even just jobs, but I think they were trying to push to a 4-day work week scenario for jobs. But I know they pushed for some of the schools here. I know, like, as far as schools go, but Sanger is one of the first schools to go to a 4-day school week starting this upcoming year.
Oh, that's interesting. I've always wondered, honestly, about like the 4-day or even just like any alternation of like a K-12 school schedule. Because the one thing I always wonder about is it's so tricky when it comes to, at least in Texas, we have what's called UIL, University Interscholastic League. Every state has their own version of how athletics and academics are governed. So for those listening, like your own state has its own version of this, but like easy example would be like football. Games are on Fridays. What if there's no school on Fridays? Like, it's interesting adjusting to things like that, to where if you have one school that's operating on a 4-day-a-week schedule, but another on a 5-day-a-week schedule, how does that end up working out for, I don't know, just like going to school on the Friday of a game? Or like, I know you don't have like practice per se on a Friday. You have like walkthroughs and stuff like that. But like, if it's not like a normal school day, how does that work?
I mean, I'll be honest, I know Sanger is a smaller school district. So like, I think that they're just testing it out. I think this is like their first year that they're officially testing it to see how it's actually going to work. I'm pretty sure hours are still going to be the same, 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. or whatever the case may be. But I don't know. I'll be honest, like, I didn't even really think about that until you mentioned it, because usually when it comes to like football and stuff like that, like your junior varsity plays on Thursdays, like your freshman at JV plays on Thursdays, and then your varsity obviously has the Friday night games. So unless they transition those Friday games to Thursday, and then you have all 3 games that play, but that would make sense, because, and one of the other things that was also kind of confusing too is, what about all the parents that rely on childcare because they have to go to work and they're not going to have that childcare and they can't go to work, or they have to take their kid to work, or they have to actually work from home? You know, like, that's what I'm saying. It's like, if you go to a 4-day-a-week school week, then I feel like having it to where most jobs could be done from home, granted dual parent households. I mean, if you have someone that has to go to work versus someone that can stay home from work, I don't know. It's definitely going to be interesting to see, because I know a couple of people that have kids that go to the Sanger school district. So it's going to be interesting to see how that's going to play out for them. I'll definitely keep up with that, and we'll talk about that in a future episode to see how it's going throughout the school year. But
yeah, we'll have to have you report back on that, because I'm curious. I do also know some districts are doing that or looking at doing that because it is cost effective to do so. It's one less day to keep the lights on, pay, janitorial staff, bus staff, like all the ancillary things that people don't think about when it comes to operating a school building or a school district. You get to save some money when you're not operating at full capacity, at least for at least one day, if not 2 out of the week. Because some districts are even looking at going to what do they call it, trimesters. They do that a lot in the Northeast, where instead of semesters, you have trimesters, where you wipe out what your idea of summer is, and you have 3 semesters, but they're called trimesters, where you still have breaks in between them, but you don't have like a large summer break. Those breaks are kind of split up a little bit. So, you might get like a fall break, and spring break might be 2 weeks rather than 1.
Yeah.
So you're still getting time off, but it's like spread more evenly throughout the year. So you have more of a constant. There's some universities that do that in the Northeast.
Well, I know that also too, there are some schools, I don't know specifically which ones though, but there are some larger schools that were built like over the course of like the last like 5-10 years, give or take, over like just across like the North Texas, DFW areas. But a lot of them are talking about having to like shut those schools down because people just aren't having kids anymore, man. Like nobody's having kids anymore. Like people our age, like we could barely afford to pay bills half the time, but yet, well, how do they expect us to have kids, and so they're having to shut down a lot of those schools. So I don't know if the whole 3 or 4 day school week is something to do with that also. But it's definitely going to be interesting to see how this is going to unfold. I mean, and now as far as doing the whole like three semesters, I think when I was in school, they talked about something similar to that, but it never happened, obviously, because I mean, being a small town, I mean, it's like it is what it is. But I'll be honest with you, I would probably rather just have just the 2 semesters and then just have my long summer break and then go back to school. Like it makes more sense because when you finish those 2 semesters and you go to summer break, you're going to another grade level. Like I feel like the trimester thing would get confusing as to like, I don't know. That's just me.
No, it's a good point. I mean, you want to say it's normal because it is, but also think about how much of the American ethos or like the American life is based around summer break. Like if you just the way that that's broken up, it's been like that since, I mean, before the 20th century, because like you went to school and then you worked on the farm during the summer and stuff like that. So, but if you think about like what the last 3-4 generations all grew up in a K-12, maybe not kindergarten, is kind of newish, but most people went to grade school in that setup. You had a fall, spring, summer break, and that's just the way it was.
All right.
And to disrupt that, I don't know if it's good or bad, but I think a lot of people view it as bad because it's different, and different is scary because that's not the way I grew up,
Right. I mean, also too, I mean, you actually said it right then too, though, but it's like, how does that affect like spring break, and how does that affect your Christmas break? Because when you finish one semester, you have the 2 to 3 weeks off, give or take. I mean, sometimes it's like, it just depends on how the year is set up, but you have about 2 to 3 weeks off, give or take. And then you come back and you're in the second semester. So it's like, if you go to a 3 semester, thing, then it's like, let's just say you go to school for 3 months, like you go to school January, February, March, have April off, go June, July, August, have April off, or September off, and then October, November, December. So theoretically, you'd have those 2 month-long breaks, but you wouldn't have your Christmas with your family. I can tell you right now, if I was a kid and they switched to that kind of stuff, I'm going to tell them straight up right now, like, look, you get me for the times that you get me, but during those holidays, I'm taking those times off. Like, simple as that. Because that's things that are, it's not, I don't necessarily think it's like, it's scary because it's different, but it's like, you're essentially rewriting the entire status quo as to what school is. And I don't know how they make it work up there in the Northeast. Like, I'd have to look at their structure of how they accommodate for those, unless they just give them this basic holiday time off. Like, but it's like, again, the way you said it though, is it's the system and the structure of how it was. So it's like people plan for summer vacation. It's like they plan for those vacations to take with their families. Like they plan to go do all the fun things. And it's like things that are done during summertime. So it's like, if you're in school during summertime, then it's like, I don't know. It just, to me, it doesn't make sense, but I guess it's because we've never dealt with that structure, and none of the schools down here have really dealt with it either. So I don't know.
Yeah, no, you're spot on. And kind of in line with that too, I know, not to make a hard pivot here, but still is in line with education. I've been seeing former president, potentially current president, or not current, sorry, former president, potentially future new president again, Donald Trump making the rounds on podcasts and certain independent news mediums of certain kinds. But I've been hearing him talk a lot about like the what ifs of his potential upcoming time in office. And he's had some really interesting ideas he's throwing out there. He's also made a lot of pivots on what historically he's been in favor of and has kind of done a 180 on certain things. But I know one thing you kind of put on there, and I'll have one to follow it up, but it looks like one of his ideas might be to eliminate the Department of Education, knowing that the Department of Education is on the federal level, and one of his big things is like putting that power back in the states. So I know, like, what were your thoughts on that? Do you have any ideas? Or
I mean, taking it from a federal level down to a state level, I'll be honest with you, I think so. There are some things that have happened in the past few years that have made it to where the states have gained power back for certain aspects. So it's like, again, we could take COVID, for example. The Fed and the government was like, no, we need to do this on a federal level. But then they eventually signed a bill where they gave that power back to the states. They're like, hey, do whatever you want. Like, if you want to open up your state, go for it. But I think it was also, it was kind of a mutual thing, but it also wasn't. I think certain states were just like, yeah, we're not going to do that, because the government can only regulate federal laws. When it comes to each individual state, each state has the say-so. Then obviously you have things like the Department of Education. And they talked about, they actually have some statistics here, but they said that if this was to happen, there'd be 8 million students every year would lose Pell Grants, which I'm going to be honest with you, 9 times out of 10, if you go to a 4-year university, they're going to nitpick everything so much that you're probably not even going to get that financial aid. You're going to have to pull out student loans. Like, that's not my experience, but I've talked with other people who they couldn't get financial aid because they fell in that very niche category of your parents make too much money for you to qualify for financial aid, but your parents also don't make enough to pay for your college, so you got to pull out student loans. So I've talked with people who have dealt with that. So it's not really a huge thing if those students would lose the Pell Grants, because most people probably wouldn't qualify for it anyways. They also listed that $490,000 or 490,000 or more teacher positions would be eliminated. Now, see, here's the thing. If they give it back to the states, teacher positions wouldn't be eliminated. They would probably just be more, I don't want to say critical, of who they hire as teacher. So it's like certain teachers probably wouldn't be hired in certain school districts and certain teachers would be. Now, I was also thinking about this as well, because I remember I was reading something, but it's like, if teachers' jobs, were like, teachers get paid, obviously, a salary. They get paid federally because it's federal money. But it's like, if you give that back to the states, then it'd just be a state fund. And the teachers would obviously have to show why they obviously, get paid what they do. I know some school districts are different than others. But when it comes to how much the teachers make, they would definitely have to restructure that for each state, because each state would have to reflect their specific pay gaps versus other states. So that would be kind of a tricky thing to deal with. Now, the biggest thing that I'm going to be 100% honest with you about, I'm surprised a lot of people haven't really, I know I've actually talked to some people who haven't done this in a minute, but $1.3 trillion in student loans would be at risk. Well, I'm going to newsflash for everybody. I'm going to tell you this right now. Those student loans are already at risk. If anyone has lived in the past 4 years, I've talked to a few people who said that they have not even paid their student loans. Like, they haven't paid them in a hot minute. They just quit paying them, which begs the question, what would happen if every student that has student loans would quit paying them? Like, they could garnish your wages, I guess, but I'm a 1099. You ain't garnishing nothing for me, buddy.
They'll come get it if you become delinquent enough, because student loans is one of the only loans you cannot have forgiven. The only way you can have forgiven is by dying. It's literally the only form of debt that you cannot have erased off you, other than
What about
dying.
what about the people, which realistically I already know where the debt went, but the people that they're like, oh, we forgave this student loan debt to this people and stuff like that. They didn't forgive it. You're looking at two people who are paying for it right now.
Yeah.
Like we're paying.
What they like to do is, so there's ways to like spin headlines with this. So some of the debt that's been forgiven were from like for-profit colleges that have since become defunct. Like, do you remember ITT Tech and like those schools? Those schools don't exist anymore. So it's kind of wild to think that like you're in debt to an institution that doesn't exist anymore. So some of that debt got forgiven. And then there's a program, you could be a part of it, to where it's like when you're paying back your federal loans, and once you make it, I forget how many years, I think it's like 20 years or something like that. After you pay it off, or you're not paying it off, but once you are paying steady for X amount of years, it's just forgiven no matter like how much you have left. But you have to pay consistently at a certain rate. I think it's like 20 years. I forget.
I thought it was. Let me look that up because I thought it was 10.
Maybe it is. I don't know. Someone fact check me on this, because I don't know. I'll just pay it back till I don't know. I'm getting close. But so they like to spin headlines to make it seem like that. But the one thing a lot of people don't realize about student loans and the money that's coming into the federal government with that, that's the largest. So if you were to look at accounts receivable for the federal government as a whole, student loans, the money they receive from that is one of the largest by percentage portions of their income they receive. So the amount of money that's coming into the federal government, student loan repayment is like one of the largest percentage blocks on that pie chart. So there's no interest whatsoever to remove that. It would be like, hey, if you're making $100,000 a month, but $75,000 of that was from student loans, like you're not going to say like, oh yeah, I don't want to receive student loan money anymore. Like it doesn't make fiscal sense for you to say, hey, we're going to forgive all this, because that's where a good chunk of your income's coming from.
All right.
But they don't ever like to talk about that.
And that obviously answers the question for everyone out there. If you're wondering why you're paying so much for your student loans and you just can't seem to get ahead of them, that's why. Because the government doesn't want you to pay off your student loan debt. They want you to continue paying your student loan debt, because when you pull out $50,000 to get a 4-year bachelor's degree, and I'm being generous by saying $50,000, by the time you're done paying that student loan off, you're probably going to be paying a quarter of, if not close to $500,000 on interest on that student loan by the time you're done paying it off.
Well, also, just quick lesson on how loans work for those listening. If you're making the minimum payment, you are going to be paying way more. You're going to be paying more in interest than you are the actual principal of the loan. So always pay more than what the minimum is. Same's true for credit cards. If you find yourself in debt, obviously this is not financial advice, but always pay more than the minimum, because the minimum, like, yes, that's the minimum of what you have to pay in order not to get charged, extra fees and whatnot on the back end. But the amount of interest on top, like you're just paying the interest. You're not paying the principal off. So while you're just paying the minimum, that total is still going up, and you're not actually chipping away at that total.
Right. Well, a lot of people too don't realize that when it comes to those, like, so I got lucky that I had 2 private loans, student loans through Wells Fargo, and then I had my UNT student loan. I lucked out whenever I went to go refi and consolidate my loans, because I took my dad off of it because he was a co-signer when I first got the loans. Took my dad off of it, refied and consolidated those loans, and I got like a below 4% interest rate on both of them. So it's like I could make minimum payments, and I still see that total go down $100 a month on one of them and $70 a month on the other one. Like it's going down because I have little to no interest. I got lucky. I refied, I think it was like 2019, 2020, something like that. But there are obviously other things here. I mean, so a couple of the things for me that would be some of the biggest things would be 23.9 million low-income students would lose $15 billion of Title I funding annually. And I don't know off the top of my head what Title I funding is, but low-income students, I mean, there's nothing you can do about that. I mean, like, at that point, again, it's back to the states, and then the states would also implement more taxes on their people living in that state just to accommodate for that. and some states probably wouldn't be able to do it. Another one is 5 million children and students with disabilities would lose $12.7 billion used every year to ensure that they receive a quality education. That kind of stuff is the stuff that I would be okay keeping the Department of Education just for things like that. And there's a couple more things too. But to me, though, the Department of Education, just like most other federal-driven entities, really need to look at how they are structured, because I'm telling you right now, man, like people who go to college, here's the thing. If you can afford to go to college and you can get out with the lowest amount of debt that you could possibly get out with, by all means, go to college. If that's what you want to do, go for it. But if you can't go to college without accumulating some form of debt and not a way to pay it off as you're going to college, or at least making payments as you're going to kind of progress that principal down, it's going to be difficult. I'm just going to say right now. And the Department of Education needs to like figure something out, because pulling out loans and then spending your life paying for them. Now, take it with a grain of salt, though. There are people out there who are like, I'm going to go get a, not a doctorate. What's the one? Master's degree. I'm going to go get a master's degree. I'm going to go $100,000 into student loan debt. I'm going to get a job making $200,000 a year, and I'm going to live like I'm making $200,000 a year, versus like, let me live, within my means. Like, let me live lower than my means. Find a place that I can afford that's cheap. Don't drive the nice fancy car. Don't go out to eat all the time. Don't go out to party all the time. Don't go out and spend all this excess money and just start funneling all the money that you make into your student loans, and you'll be out of debt sooner than what you realize if you start, like you said, if you make higher than the minimum payments on your student loans.
What I think is terrifying, though, is I think we see, I'll go out there and say it's probably the majority of people that go to college where they find themselves in a scenario where they go and get a master's. Well, okay, I'll take it back. Maybe not the majority of people, but there's a good portion of those that go to college that end up majoring, rather it be in their undergrad, their master's program, or even their doctoral program, where they get a degree in theatrical studies or something that is very niche in the liberal arts. And then they find themselves working an hourly job somewhere, or like a very entry-level salaried position that is nowhere near related to what they received their degree in or degrees in. I don't know where I was going with that thought, other than I think the one thing that I don't think a lot of people get sat down and told before they go off to college is, this is how the world kind of works. And while you are more than welcome to attempt to change how the world works, your doctoral degree in theatrical studies may not get you where you want to go in life, financially at least. Cool information to know. I mean, no harm in that. There's got to be someone out there. And that's not to say jobs don't exist out there for doctoral students in theatrical studies, or, insert your liberal arts degree here. Those jobs definitely exist, but they're not a dime a dozen the way they would make you think they are.
Well, we've briefly, and I'll try to make this quick so we can try to get to something else, but like we've talked about this briefly before, but I think that unless that's a field where it's like medical, law, engineering. I mean, there's probably like other broad areas that you can kind of get into, but unless it's like a major thing where like you have to study for like 10 years just to even get good at it, I don't think it should require a degree to do. I think it should only require, at most, maybe an associate's level degree, like, because you can get a whole bunch of stuff done with an associate's level degree. Even certifications, you can get a lot done. But what's cool, though, is there's a lot of websites now, like Skillshare and things like that, where you can just pay like a few $100, and people who are pros at what they do will teach you the same things that they learn how to do. But what it took them 5 to 10 years to learn, they can teach it to you in like 5 months, and then you'll have certifications for it. Like, it's And so it just begs the question, it's like, if you want to be a graphic designer, okay, cool. You want to be a graphic designer. You don't even have to I feel like you don't even necessarily have to go to college to be a graphic designer, to be honest with you. I feel like you could buy the programs, like you have Adobe Creative Cloud, so like you could buy the programs and then just pay for classes that are cheap and inexpensive, and then it will teach you how to run those programs and how to utilize those programs to its fullest extent. And then once you get those certifications, all you do is just start a portfolio, start offering to do designs for people, like charge them very minimal amounts, like say like, hey, and then once you get good at it, that's when you start going to talk to companies and people and whatever it is that you want to go do, and find out if you can get an actual job doing it. And a lot of people will hire you if they like you enough and they see the potential. They'll hire you. You don't need a piece of paper.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. I think while it's not true for every career path, I think there are a lot out there that, like you said, you really don't need the piece of paper per se. And a lot of those, fortunately, also unfortunately, are in the liberal arts. There's, because the computers and the internet exists, like without the internet, completely different argument to be had. But with the internet, there's so much information that can be self-service out there, and you don't have to pay tens of twenties of hundreds of thousands of dollars to an institution to learn this information. There's even free YouTube videos out there. The amount of content alone that's on YouTube that you can learn that's been vetted by industry professionals is ridiculous. It's basically the Library of Alexandria 2.0, which is crazy to think about. That is kind of is that. And if it were to disappear, well, someone burned down the library again. So, one thing I did see this week, not to just circle back, but if we circle back to our idea of Texas centrism or Texas dominance, I saw a tweet earlier this week. I didn't think too much of it at first, but then it kind of hit me after I scrolled past it on Twitter, and I was like, oh, snap, this is like a big deal. The tweet was from none other than Michael Dell of Dell Technologies, also a Round Rock, Texas-based company, which Round Rock is just a suburb of Austin. The tweet said, "We're building a Dell AI factory with Nvidia to power Grok for xAI," and then he tagged at Elon Musk. And he had a picture of a bunch of like Dell computer servers in a warehouse, basically. And I was scrolling past, and I was like, oh, that's cool, whatever. And I was like, hold on a minute. That's kind of a big deal. A Texas company, Dell, is becoming the backbone for xAI, which, Riley, I don't know if you know about xAI, but that's so like Elon was one of the original like founding, I think, board members for OpenAI. And he ended up leaving OpenAI because he didn't jive with the ethos of what was going on. So now he's like doing his own version of that. So on like Twitter, if you're a premium member, you get access to Grok, which Grok isn't really, I don't think it's not up to speed with OpenAI quite yet with ChatGPT, but it's getting there. I can see it getting there. But it's a language learning model that you can chat with and have it do stuff for you. But he has xAI, which he's trying to ramp up and be hyper competitive in the marketplace, which, you know, Elon Musk is Elon Musk, and who knows what Grok's going to look like. And even a year's worth of time from now, I could be laughing with how wrong I was with my prediction, but it's still cool to see that Dell, a Texas company, is building this for Elon Musk in Texas. And so I was looking into it, and it's like a legit thing. So I have an article from CNBC. It just says, shares of Dell Technologies and Supermicro Computer jumped Thursday after Elon Musk revealed that the two hardware makers will provide servers to help his artificial intelligence startup xAI develop a supercomputer. Supermicro shares popped more than 8% in recent trading, while Dell gained 1%. Dell's shares are worth a lot, so 1% still is a decent chunk of change there. Elon Musk promised to build a $500 million Dojo supercomputer in Buffalo, New York, and a super dense water-cooled supercomputer cluster at the company's factory in Austin, Texas. The technology would potentially help Tesla develop a computer vision and large language models needed for robots and autonomous vehicles. Musk founded xAI last year as a challenger to Microsoft-backed OpenAI and Alphabet's Google. Musk also co-founded OpenAI. Michael Dell, CEO of Dell, said Wednesday in an X post what I basically told you about, how there's a Dell AI factory being built for Elon Musk and xAI. So it's kind of cool that, Texas seemed like it's becoming the center of finance with its own Texas Stock Exchange. We already know it's kind of the center of autonomous vehicles because Tesla's here. We already know Silicon Hills or like Austin has kind of become like, there's all these like secondary headquarters for all these like tech companies that are, usually housed out of Silicon Valley in California. But now they're starting to become a little bit of an AI presence here too, with Dell and Tesla kind of teaming up to build these supercomputer clusters for AI. So I don't know what's going to come of this, but I remember just scrolling through this week and I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. We'll see what happens with this. So I imagine we might be talking about it in more detail in the days to come once more information becomes public. But
right. Yeah, no, definitely think Texas, and I know somehow, some way we find ourselves talking about, just infrastructure and just how things are going and the economy and whatnot, but so much is happening so fast, and it just begs the question, like, Texas is like literally becoming the center of pretty much anything, and there's still so much, like we talked about, there's still so much untapped potential for what's to come to Texas. And yeah, it's interesting. Very good stuff. Very interesting stuff. And I'm excited to see what's actually going to happen with it. Still a little bit nervous though, because again, I'm still not on the whole EV train. Like, I'm not about that. I don't know how I feel about electric vehicles still. I still would not buy one myself. If they eventually stopped the production of all combustion engines and they made it to where it's just only EV, well, I'm bicycling myself to my showings. I'll see you in 5 hours, y'all. I'll be there. But so like, I don't know. Like, I don't think I could ever see myself buying one realistically.
Going back to your like anti-California sentiment from last week, which I saw one of our dedicated followers and listeners last week called you out for that as well about California. But did you see, this has been news for a while now, it's not anything groundbreaking, but the state of California is going to outlaw all combustion engines. I think it's by like 2035 or 2030.
I did see that.
Like literally all combustion engines, like lawnmowers and cars and like anything that requires gasoline, basically, of some kind. Kind of crazy to think about.
Yeah, no, it's definitely, I don't think Texas will ever do that.
No way.
I'm being honest. Texas will never do anything like that. Texas will, I would see Texas opening up their own production line for combustion engines before they did anything like that.
Dude, it's a lot of people forget, like the Permian Basin in West Texas is, I think it's like the second largest oil depository that we know of on the planet, like outside of Saudi Arabia. It's kind of bananas, and we've yet to really truly drill there. Like, yeah, we drill there, but because of the current and past administrations, we haven't really drilled there too much. But if it came down to it, like Texas could very easily fuel the United States for the rest of multiple lifetimes. So I don't think the combustion engine in Texas is going anywhere anytime soon. I think if anything, what we would see is a super refinement of the combustion engine to where it becomes hyper efficient. And then of course you throw like hybrid elements in there too, where you have a battery on board still, where, it helps become hyper efficient, especially when you're, in gridlock traffic and stuff like that.
Right.
But yeah, I can't foresee Texas outlawing combustion engines ever. Like, I don't know. I could be totally wrong, but I'm gonna go on the record. I don't think that's ever happening in our lifetime. No. I think it's a bold move to go other than that. So.
I don't think our country's even ready for just all electric yet. I don't think they'll be ready. It won't be ready in our lifetime. That's for sure.
The power's got to come from somewhere. You can't just plug it in and assume that power's just coming from like nowhere. You got to burn something to make that electricity.
Yeah. But have you ever been to West Texas?
Yeah.
You have? What part of West Texas have you been to?
I've been to Midland, Odessa, and then I've been to El
Okay.
Paso.
Okay, because we've been to Midland, Odessa a couple times too. Because they do have obviously your companies out there, but again, they've barely scratched the surface of what's out there just because of how large the area actually is. But yeah. So actually didn't get to ask you this question last week, and I guess it's okay because you were a little cloud like head cloudness and everything like that. And like to kind of go back to the beginning of this episode when we talked about last week's talking about the draft and everything. If you were drafted, I know technically speaking you have to go, but would you?
That's a good question. I've thought about that, man. When I was still in that age bracket, I thought about that so much. It really, I think it depends on just like what's going on. Like if you were to tell me today, like let's pretend I'm like a 25, 26-year-old, they're like, yo, you're going to Ukraine to fight Russia. With what I know, I'm like, no, there's no rhyme or reason to be in for that. Like I would not be motivated in the slightest. Like there would be no sense of patriotism there, But like if you were to have something to where, I don't know, like I'm not even going to go as far to say like a Pearl Harbor type moment because we even knew that was kind of a little bit not staged, but we knew it was coming. Like if you had something that cause for like, hey, like it's time to be patriotic, it's time to go do this thing. Like, okay, like I kind of get it, but I just feel like I feel like we know too much as a society now to really be like, yeah, we're cool with whatever you tell us to do. Like just what I know about all the historical wars, I'm like, I could tell you what staged or orchestrated incident got us to go in there. Like, long story short, probably not. Just because, like, if you look at our most recent, like, draftable war, if you look at the Vietnam War, for anyone listening, go look into the Gulf of Tonkin incident. It was a 100% not real thing that caused us to get into the war with Vietnam, or with North Vietnam. It didn't happen. No one attacked us. Everyone was like, yo, we got attacked. Like, no, we didn't get attacked. We factually know our military lied for us to get into war. Like, we knew it was a lie. But yet we still sent our boys over there to go die, and they got slaughtered. So long story short, no, I'm probably not going.
That begs the question then how much other stuff that they quote unquote lied about that got us inadvertently stuck in a war. I'll be honest, I mean I kind of have the same idea. Like I'm not just gonna go blindly fight to for something that we probably don't even know what's going on or don't even have a reason to be in that fight. Now I'll be honest with you, have you ever seen the movie Red Dawn? Either the old one?
Yeah.
If something like that was to happen, I'll be honest with you, like I'd be on top of a roof like all day, like chilling out, and I'd just be taking pop shots of people flying out of the sky.
Yes.
That's just me.
Totally different. Like it's one thing to protect the homeland versus leaving the homeland to theoretically protect the homeland.
And to possibly, I mean, you could die in either scenario, but at least if you're fighting here, you have that home turf advantage where you understand the layout of your land, what's going on.
Yeah.
But I kind of have the same thing. But if it was a Red Dot situation, all hands on deck, buddy. I'm ready. Like, let's do this thing. Like, let's go. I'm ready. I'm about to go ramble on all these guys. Like, I'm about to be what Chris Hemsworth was in the newer one. Like, that's what I'm about to be like. Like, let's do this. But it was just a question I had. I wanted to ask last week, but you weren't feeling well, and then also too, I kind of just it slipped my mind. But I was like, oh, I could have asked that question to leave off with. But you heard it here first, folks. Your duo for Unscripted Company. Not that we wouldn't fight for our country, but we're not going to leave to go fight an unnecessary war for our country.
That's why we're unscripted, not conscripted. So, yes, thank you. Thank you. Man, okay, so we're like, 4 episodes away from a live stream potentially here coming up?
Yeah, we are.
Man, so if y'all are listening right now or watching, first of all, thank you for making to this part of the episode. If you can do us a huge favor, we both really appreciate it. No matter where you're watching, whether it be YouTube, Rumble, Spotify, I don't know, maybe we're holograms in the future at this point on some unforeseen platform. Give us a like, give us a follow, a subscribe. leave us a comment. Let us know what was your favorite part of the episode. Are there any topics you want us to talk about that maybe we haven't talked about yet? It could be something totally off the wall. We'll talk about everything from conspiracy theories to trending news. We're here to keep the conversation going. But we really appreciate any likes, subscribes, comments, stuff like that. It really helps the algorithm tell other people, hey, we have something worth sharing here. So we appreciate both your time and your efforts on that. As always, I'm going to give the last word to Riley. I'm going to let him leave you with the wisest words of wisdom that you will ever hear this week. Take it away, Riley.
First, before we get to those very wise words, as you can see here, I have the official Unscripted Company merch on. We had a little bit of technical difficulties and shipping difficulties on my partner here, but mine came in, so we're wearing that now. We are supposed to be having our live stream hopefully in a couple weeks. That's what we're planning on. So if you want to tune in on that, you never know what could be said or what could happen. As far as your wise words of parting words, I should say, don't go to war for anything that you don't understand. You know, like that. I guess that's if we want to leave it off on that. Also, do you trust the education system or do you not trust the education system? That is the big question. What is your degree in? Do you feel like you got your money's worth out of your degree or do you not? Ask yourself these questions because these are the questions that very well might save you hundreds of thousands of dollars in student loan debt.